Hi, everyone. I'm Cheryl Gottschall, and this is Strange Encounters Down Under. And today I have a special guest. I have Rowan, who's here to talk about her personal experience with what she thinks or could possibly be is extraterrestrials or aliens or entities or something like that, isn't it, Ro?
Yeah, that's right. Thanks, Cheryl. Yeah, it started when I was very young, so it's been going basically the whole time.
Right. So there are like people who've had contacts. They refer to themselves as contactees, abductees, experiencers. How do you refer to yourself and why?
A contactee. I actually don't feel like I'm an abductee per se. I don't feel like I'm just experiencing. I'm definitely contacted by them.
Right. Okay. But not against your will or nothing?
When I was very young, it was definitely against my will. But in the later years, it's been a kind contact. It hasn't been a negative contact.
So it's evolved.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, look, why don't we start there? I think your story begins about 8 or 9 in the bedroom when you saw little people. Is that right?
Yeah. I always knew it was going to happen before it happened. So I would already get a little bit scared before they entered the room, whoever they were. They were little. The only way I can describe them, I suppose, now in reflection is troll-like. Definitely not greys. I'd never ever seen greys until I saw the Book of Communion when I was well into my later teens. But these little beings would come in. I'm only assuming now on reflection, I must have had a sleep paralysis because I couldn't scream, I couldn't move. I was basically a victim to whatever they were doing to me, but it wasn't a sexual thing or anything like that. So, and it definitely wasn't human.
Did you have your eyes open at the time?
Yes, I saw whatever they were doing, but the only way to describe what they were doing was to mess around with reality. So time would go really, really fast or really slowly.
Sort of like a gravitational interference?
Not that I would say. I'm not exactly sure whether I went outside of the bedroom or because I sort of had to block it out. I was so young that I just still had to get on with my day and at school. So 2 things I definitely remember was the time, and I remember lots of lights, and I remember the room spinning around my bed like a MRI machine. The whole room just got like would be just a blur, but it was the most petrifying thing you could possibly imagine, just lying there basically ransomed to these little beings sort of mucking around with reality.
That's interesting. It almost sounds like dimensions coming together, if we could call it that, doesn't it?
Could be. Yeah, like I said, I have blocked out. I know there was 3 things that happened, and the third thing I can't really remember, so I don't know whether I was actually taken away from my bedroom, from my memories now. I suppose if I got regression, that could help, but I don't really want to be regressed anyway. I do have quite clear memories throughout my experiences, abductions or whatever they are. So to do with those little people, the only way I don't recall exactly what they looked like. However, my mum got the book Where the Wild Things Are, and I actually thought it was a bit of an instruction book of what's happening to you, Rowan, here we go. And only being so young, I didn't realize that it was a fiction book. I thought it was a real book, except these little things didn't have horns, and those Where the Wild Things Are had horns.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just basically scream during that book. I just could not get through the book to the end. Mum would be like, it's just a shadow. And I'm like, it's not a shadow, Mum. These aren't shadows.
Mm-hmm. So Was she like, I mean, parents in that situation, I can understand why they would say, no, it's not real, so that you wouldn't be scared.
Yeah.
But sometimes parents would say, oh, it's okay, you'll be right, you'll be safe, got some magic wands here, it can protect you and all that sort of stuff. Like, was she open to the whole idea at that time?
No, absolutely not. I just basically was left by myself dealing with it. The only way I could force it to stop was for me to sleep in my sister's room. And I only just discovered that by accident, sleeping in my sister's room, and it didn't happen, because otherwise it happened basically every night. And
it
so
did, or
pardon?
It did, or it could?
It felt like I'm going to say at least a few months every night. And so when I finally did sleep in my sister's room, I realized that it wasn't happening in there. So I actually forced my parents to move me in there permanently. And they're like, but you've got your own bedroom now, blah, blah. And I was like, this ain't worth it. So I basically stopped it fully from happening by just forcing my parents to basically buy bunks and move me into my sister's room rather than having my own bedroom.
Right.
Yeah. And I was only still young enough that it didn't really matter anyway, and they didn't really understand, my parents. So
yeah. So these beings would show up, and the room would spin every time. Is that what you're saying?
I can't really recall, but I do remember that happening towards the end most of the time. It was like the last thing, and be like, no, I don't want this to go on. And then I do remember finally being able to get my voice back and screaming out to mum, come and whatever it was that I said, come and get me, or just, waking somebody up right at the end of whatever they were doing. So like I said, there were 3 separate things that I remember. Sorry. And I know I've blocked one of them out.
Right.
So because I was like, there's the 3. And
Did your sister ever say anything happened to her? Like, even now, does she reflect on that? Or
I do know that there was a dream, an actual dream, because so this is where I know that definitely wasn't a dream. There was a dream that I had of these little beings, and it's like they came back in a dream, or maybe I just dreamt of them. And I remember telling my sister about that dream. So I'm pretty sure if I went back, because it's a bit bizarre, the dream. And this is where I sort of started to go, or maybe I didn't know. I know I wasn't making this up, but because they came in the dream, they chopped everybody's ears off, and they had a big wheelbarrow of ears. And even to this day, I still have to sleep with the doona up over my ears. So I know she knows that part of my life.
Yeah, right.
And I know that was these little things that come along.
Yeah. You ever have any flashbacks to those times?
Well, it's always I can recall it very clearly. So I don't necessarily flash back, but I can recall it very clearly what happened. Yeah.
That's a very curious experience, particularly, I presume you were laying in bed with when the room was spinning around.
Yeah. Couldn't move. Was stuck there. Yeah.
How long did that go on for?
The spinning?
Yeah.
Oh, at least 5-10 minutes. It wasn't just once or twice. It was a prolonged, scary point of view. Yeah. And at the time I had no idea what was going on. And like I said, I had actually had to try and block it out, because I just couldn't. It was just so strange.
Yeah, it is strange.
Yeah.
Did you was there a build up of something that would bring it on, and then a petering out, or did it just flash and happen?
I think I was expecting it, and I sort of remember lying in bed going, oh no, it's going to happen. Oh no, here we go. So it was sort of like I suppose some sort of build up, but I don't know whether it was a psychic thing or whether it was because I was maybe paralyzed or whatever was happening. I knew it was going to happen. And I'd sort of lie in bed, I think, oh, that didn't happen. Or, oh no, it's going to happen tonight. Oh dear, And
so how would it finish?
It would finish with basically this room stopped spinning, and I suppose dark again, and I'd be able to kind of force myself then to shout out to my parents.
Oh, okay.
Mm.
I asked that because sometimes witnesses have reported to me that something can sort of come down very small, almost like the screen closing on the old-fashioned televisions. You know, it'd come to a point in the middle of the screen and everything would just gone then, you know.
No, that I haven't actually thought about how it appears, but it was like they sort of just went out of the wall. They were gone, and then the lights would go off, and whatever it was that was going on would stop, and then it'd be just me by myself, and it'd be like, "Mom," you know.
Did you ever see anything outside while this was happening, or?
No.
Fair enough. So other things happened to you when you were a teenager as well, and there were missing fetus. Tell us about that.
Yeah. When I was 17, I've sent you a couple of photos of a pregnancy, my first boyfriend. So we, obviously it was my first boyfriend. I didn't know much about the pill. I was only 17, so still living at home, and I'd go and see my boyfriend on weekends and whenever. And we accidentally got pregnant, and I do have a photo of me sort of growing here, and I was wearing a gigantic jumper and trying to.
I'll insert that later.
Because my grandparents were there, and I was, oh my God, everyone's going to just see that I'm pregnant. So I know I was definitely pregnant. Although I can't remember having any ultrasounds or any of that sort of stuff. But obviously I had to go to the doctor because I think there was only home pregnancies then. So I do have photos of me feeling like I'm looking pregnant. So we booked into a clinic, or actually he booked in because I didn't really know anything about it. He was a couple of years older than me. So he booked me into a Sydney-based abortion clinic. So it was just a dedicated abortion clinic. They put you into like a twilight anesthetic. And I do recall just many beds with just us all kind of recovering at the end. And the nurse came up to me afterwards and she said, "Oh, by the way, there was no fetus in there." And I was like, you just obviously missed it. You didn't catch that one, you overlooked it. Must have been minuscule. And so that was that. And I've got a photo of me the day after where I'm completely flat then. And then a couple of years later, I was pregnant again by somebody, and I only found out after we'd split up. So I thought, well, I'm not going to have a baby to somebody after I split up with them. So I went to the gynecologist and just asked if I could just have that procedure done. And yep, that's not a problem. So we went in, and this was Taree Base Hospital. Went in to the hospital, had the same procedure, twilight. It was a curette, and then came out in recovery. The nurse came up to me again and she said, "Oh, it's very strange. We never have to say this, but there was no fetus in there." And again, I thought, you've missed it. You guys must be incompetent, and put it behind me and never really thought about it again. Obviously, I didn't want to have abortions, but I only felt like I was young anyway. So I wasn't going to have a baby when I still felt like a teen. I was a teen. And it's only now I'm piecing all bits and pieces together and saying to myself, hang on, a 10 to 12 week fetus would not be a little speck that they would miss. And obviously these people would know what they're talking about because that's their dedicated job. So I'm like, oh gosh, that's really strange when there was no fetus in there. So yeah, that's another thing I'm putting down to ET interfering with, having contact with. I don't recall anything that went on with them, but between those two times, I did actually have a full-on contact, with awake contact with. The only thing I could call them was Palladians because that's just what everyone else calls them. So
okay,
yeah.
So do you want to tell us about that then? that's part of the story between the two pregnancies, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I know because of the timeline where I was living at the time. So I moved from Taree to Noosa, moved back to Taree, then I had that boyfriend. That's, yeah. So, and when I was living at Noosa, we were staying in a small, actually it was a really lovely townhouse. So we were right at the back, and at the back was our laundry and line, and then there was a fence and things like that. And one time I was hanging some washing out in the dark because I thought, oh, oops, I forgot to do that. I better go out and hang it out. And I don't know whether this light came down, but there was a min light in front of me, about like larger than a basketball, at least a foot across. So I sort of stepped back a bit, away from the line, away from the laundry door, and it was bouncing in front of me, like bouncing probably at least 2 meters away, 2 to 3 meters. So it was sort of coming a bit closer, bouncing along, sort of like playing with me in some ways. And I'm not sure whether we were having a communication, but I felt like it knew what I was thinking. And I thought, I'm not going to touch you. Better be careful because you're radioactive, or you're,
something, yeah,
going to be dangerous. I don't want to touch you. So I'm trying to move on back, and it's, bouncing around. So
what time of night was this?
I'm going to say 9 o'clock.
Okay.
Yeah. I wouldn't be able to tell you what exact day it was, but I know I had to go to work the next day. And
right.
Yeah. So what happened was, then the ball of light just came flying straight at me and bashed me in the head, basically. And then I was floating up, straight up, nothing around me, just floating. And I seem to recall something like, don't look down, just look up. So I was like, oh, gosh, I did look down. And what was down there was obviously my house, and getting smaller and smaller. And I was going up towards this craft, knowing full well that this was not human. This was, I'm going to say, 1991. Right. 1990, 91, knowing we did not have these craft. Yeah.
So when you looked down and you could see your house, could you see your physical body? Like, was this happening physically or an out of body?
Physically. Yeah, I was in the air. And I looked up and I saw a rectangular craft. I'm going to say about the size of a minibus, and the same type of shape.
Right.
And I thought to myself, I've got to force myself to remember every little detail here. I can't forget anything. Yeah. So I remember like forcing myself to remember what I was looking at. And what I was looking at was red hot iron, red hot, whatever it was, coils of some description. I'm not sure of the material, but I just remember they were like the heat radiating. You could see the heat. So I went sort of they did not burn me, but I basically went right up through the center of the craft and landed inside the craft on the deck, for want of a better word.
So wait a minute, what shape is this?
It was a rectangle.
Rectangle, but the deck itself, it was flat, was it? Or?
Yeah. So it was inside the craft then. So I'd come basically straight up through the floor. I don't remember a hole. I just remember up through the floor and landed there. And 2 tall blonde males and 2 tall blonde females. The females were on my left, the males were on my right, basically just standing there looking at me. And no one said anything. And I just didn't know what to say. And I didn't know whether these people had ever been to Earth. And I just assumed they hadn't been to Earth. So greetings, welcome to Earth. But inside, what was going through my head was, don't kill me, don't rape me, don't murder me, don't steal me. don't
Yes.
take things from me.
Yeah. What did they look like?
Really good looking, tall, blonde Nordics. So all I can explain.
Were they human looking?
Yeah, but very tall. So,
and their body structure, what was that like?
Yeah, muscular, good looking, like
okay.
extremely good looking.
So would they have been over 6 feet tall?
I'm going to say yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm 5'3", but so I actually looked almost identical to them because I was slim at that time, blonde hair, and we could have been family almost, except they were, so I actually stood there and realized how much I looked like them as well. But I've been, racking my brain for decades about what they've said, what we all said. So I don't know whether they used their mouth to talk to me or whether they used their minds. But the few things were said. I think it was like, we're not going to hurt you, but if you touch us, we'll kill you. So that kind of was like, well, they're not here to rape me then.
So they don't want to hurt you, but if you touch them, they'll kill you. Now,
in other words, if I get violent and I thought, I wonder if that means that maybe they're electric or something, and maybe if I accidentally touched one that I might get zapped. That's all that was going through my head.
Yeah, right.
Because the reason why I know that was because later I actually did reach out and touch one. I thought, well, that didn't kill me. So
it's a bit like when you go into the banks and there's those signs that say, we will not put up with any abusive behavior.
Exactly. Yeah.
The aliens have got this sign up. That's very funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But the next thing that happened was basically they went straight into inviting me to drive their craft. Would you like to fly the craft? So yeah. So of course that was amazing. So I know that there was 4 swivel seats, which didn't make sense, but now maybe it does make sense now. 4 swivel seats, 2 towards the front, which is my right hand side, and 2 at the back. So the lady sat at the back. They didn't talk to me really, and only one male I remember talking to me, or maybe one female who said that. But anyway, so the male on the left hand chair moved out of the way and stood basically behind me while I flew the craft. And basically he was giving me lessons. So there must have been like a monitor or a windscreen, so I could see out, and all I could see out was fields, just going underneath us. That's how fast we were going. So field. And I felt like we were going just so fast. So I was, proud of myself. And whatever I was doing, so don't ask me any of the details, because I just remember being able to fly the craft. So when it was, I don't know how long it was, it felt like a long time that we were going. And I thought, we better get back sort of now. Because it's, by the time we get back is about half of the night, I guess. So he popped in the seat while I stood up behind him on the right-hand side. And he said, well, that's not fast. This is fast. And then he just went so fast that it was like a blur, and we were going, I don't even know where we went, just for hours and a long way. And I started to panic. And I was like, well, we're not, how far, where are we? And how far away are we? And what are you doing, kind of thing. And that's where I touched him on the shoulder right here. And I said, excuse me, but can we go home now? And he said, yes. And I thought, well, that's good. Yeah, he's real. I grabbed him and he responded, sort of thing. And I thought, well, that's a non-threatening spot there. So he said, yeah, but first we're going to put an implant in the back of your head, in the back of your neck. And he said, we're going to shave it. And I was more petrified about getting an undercut, actually, than whatever. So then the 2 ladies grabbed me and pulled me towards the back. And then I woke up like that and I was like, oh my God. And so I was in my bed and I'm like rubbing, God, well, I don't have any shave there. And so maybe they didn't do anything, but I do have a lump there, but I'm pretty sure that's been there a long time. And I was kind of like, well, I don't feel any pain. I know I didn't dream it. And the whole I woke up in the morning. So the whole day, all I did was, I think they must have said, we'll see you later. We'll see you. And so I just spent all day in my shop looking for these 4 beings to come in. And why would you do that if it was a dream? You know, it doesn't make sense if it was a dream. And I know it wasn't a dream. So even though I woke up in my bed.
Yeah. Well, I've touched that. I felt that lump on the back of your neck. I've seen it.
Yeah.
And it's a pale mole.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether that's left over from whatever happened or it arose as a psychosomatic response to what happened.
No, it's been there a long time, but that's when I started to go, oh my God, what is that a thing?
Yeah.
But the next morning, like I hopped up, went upstairs to have breakfast, and I put the radio on, and on the radio said there was a UFO seen that night.
Yeah. And
it was a fluorescent green cylindrical tube UFO over the water, reported by 2 fishermen.
Okay.
So it's like, God, that wasn't the same as my craft, but
it would have been a bit of a realization moment, like, wow, that was real or something like that.
I already knew it was real. Yeah. And I was like,
but even more so.
Yeah.
So just going back to the beings, when the 2 women grabbed you, what did that feel like when they touched you? What did their skin feel like? Was it a firm grip? What was going on there?
Yeah, I think it was just because I was panicking. I wanted to go home. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know what they were going to do. In that way, it was an abduction, if you want to look at it like that. I didn't consent to an implant. I will tell you a couple of more instances that make me feel like I've got an implant, because they've basically followed me around the world since then.
Well, just before you do though, but just let me know when they grabbed you, like, could you feel their skin?
Yes. So they must have grabbed, I believe, from what I can remember, they grabbed both my arms, pulled me kind of like, I'm not sure whether there was another room behind where they were both sitting, and I had to lay down. These are just things that like I can remember.
So what did their skin feel like?
Oh, I can't remember. Yeah. I mean, I have never thought about their skin, but I know they definitely grabbed me, and no, I didn't die.
Yeah.
I'll get that.
All right, fine. Yes.
So that must have been a bit of a threat or a warning when they said that to me about, they'll kill me, but maybe it was just like, don't get violent, or else watch out, sort of, we don't want you to get violent. And it was a bit of a like, oh yeah, respect them.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. So you saw you saw a green fluorescent tube later on?
Yeah. I actually had another incident between seeing that.
Yeah.
But what happened with that, not the green tube one, was we were in, so I was 21. I had my 21st birthday over in England, where my dad had taken me. I was born over there. And Dad basically took me over there to show me where I was born and all my family and things. So we had seen lots of family in London, and we'd also been to another place near London. And when we had Christmas lunch or dinner there, then we drove up all night to between England to Scotland, where my dad was born and where we were staying for the next week. So Dad was in the front. My little brother was sitting in the front passenger seat, and I had the whole back seat to myself then. And I remember sitting on the left-hand side of the car and just gazing up out of the window, and I saw lights up in the sky. It was foggy though,
Mm-hmm.
And so the lights were perfectly round with lights going one way, like lots of lights all spinning one way, and then another centrical circle in between spinning the other way, but both of the lights were coming in and out.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent like an hour, 2 hours. It was driving directly above our car, flying, I mean, while we were driving. And it basically followed us the whole way. And of course, I didn't know what it was. I was 21, you know.
So how high above your car?
It was directly above the car. It was above tree line, and it just looked like lights reflected up onto fog or reflected down through fog.
Okay.
And I never really heard of UFOs. There was no real news. There was nothing, you know. So I kept on saying to Dad, you know, what is that? And the only thing that I could think of was some light reflected onto our hubcap, reflecting up there. And it still made no sense because hubcaps don't move like that. And there's no light in the middle of nowhere to reflect up onto the sky. So I do remember looking for a long time and just watching it flying directly above our car like this. And then it would disappear. And it's like, oh, well, there you go. That was that. And I shuffle across the seat to the other side and look out the right-hand window up. And we even wound the window down, like my head out, just in case it's, you know, trying to check what is this thing. And it was on that side. So whatever it was not a reflection. So, but then a few years later, I'd gone back overseas again. This time I was in Zimbabwe. And we were camping on the Zambezi River in Zimbabwe. And I didn't realize this was right near the aerial school, and only a couple of years later, like 2 years later. So I think it was 96 when we were over there. That was 94. So I turned 20. Yeah, so that was 93 when we were over in England, and 96 when I was in Zimbabwe. So we were camping on the Zambezi River with we were on a bit of a tour. And we're basically in the middle of nowhere on the beach part, and we saw a satellite go directly overhead, and that was what we said. Look at the satellite. That was that. When a couple of minutes later, somebody said, "Oh, what's that over there?" And right on the horizon, far, far, far away on the horizon, was a mountain range, and directly above the mountain range was a green cylindrical UFO going straight across like that. And just thought, oh my God, I know exactly what that is. I've heard of that before. And that was all going on in my head. And I thought, I never said anything at all. And then people were, I don't know what it is. And I just finally said, I think it's a UFO. And as soon as I said that, it disappeared behind a tiny, tiny little cloud. The cloud wouldn't have covered it. It just disappeared.
Yeah, right.
And I was like, okay, that was weird when I said that. So a week later, we were in the Drakensberg Mountains in South Africa, camping again. We're in a mountain range, and we'd walked all day. It was exhausting. And came back, and we were sort of trying to get dinner going before. It was dark in the campground, but when you looked straight up in the sky, it was actually still blue. So it was that time of day, dusk. So we were just kind of doing our, sitting around, and we saw a satellite go across again in the daytime this time. That was night, the last one. There were two massive clouds, and it went between the clouds. And I said, guess what happened last time? So I'm trying to tell this girl that we were camping with, I'm looking around. I couldn't articulate, I was like, how do you say this stuff? Because no one talked about any of this, know. And I was trying to look around the campground for this fluorescent green color, and guess what I saw? And I was like, where's the color? No, it's not there. Look straight up, and here's this thing flying straight across the clouds like that, this way this time. Dead silent, massive. So I can't even get my head around how big this would be, because it was above the clouds, going between the clouds. So it was this huge tube. It was like glass. It was like optic fiber. It was bright green on the ends, like optic fiber lights up on the ends. And it was just this perfectly round cylinder. It was smooth, made no noise, going basically the exact trajectory of the satellite that we'd seen. So I was like, oh my God, I was talking about it at that time. Did that mean that, it's following me? So I don't know.
Yeah, I was just thinking, oh, sorry, go on.
No, I don't know what the answer is there.
Yeah. No, you mentioned the Drakensberg Mountains. I remember that's where Elizabeth Clara had her contact with an alien. Then at the time, contactee she was. So yeah, yeah. So that's a really interesting description.
Yeah.
Of light glass and very smooth. I've heard that many times before.
Oh, have you? Okay.
Yeah, and just almost futuristic because it's the technology seems to be so advanced.
Yeah. And it had no sound, no wings, no propellers, no anything. And even at the time, people were not talking about it. I'm like, why aren't we talking? This is like,
yes, I know,
the biggest thing ever. Yeah.
So did anyone report, was there any sort of, what were the responses? I know people weren't talking about it, but did you notice anything about you, or the hair on your body standing up, or?
I just felt excited, but it seemed like everybody else was nonplussed, not even any kind of emotion, not excitement, nothing. No one talked about it.
Strange things, isn't it, that happens with people? Yeah.
Yeah, very strange.
Very unusual.
So I got a couple of confirmations, though, afterwards when I came back to Australia that these beings definitely existed, and I wasn't just imagining it.
Yeah.
The first time I'd moved down to Sydney after coming back from Taree. The next year I moved to Sydney.
When was that?
Pardon me?
When was that? What year?
When it was 96 again. So I'd gone overseas, and I actually, it must have been 97 because I met my husband in Sydney only a couple of months after moving down there, and we had bought our own house. So I know we bought that house in 2000. So this happened in my house, and of course, no one said anything at all about anything this whole time. So I was standing out in the backyard, and he was in the backyard as well, doing gardening and things. And it was daytime, and I saw 3 rainbows. One was, well, maybe both were upside down. There was 2 upside down and one right, or 2 the right way and one upside down, right above each other. So 3 rainbows in one little corner of the sky on the, I don't even know whether it was, north, south, or east or west, but it was on my right-hand side in the sky. Oh, look at that. That's really strange. And of course, I'm trying to tell him, oh, look up there. He's busy. So, and then in my mind, I was like, gosh, I've seen these strange things for a long time. Do these things even exist? What's going on? And I looked up in the sky, and right when I was thinking this, I saw a little balloon go past, up behind us. I thought it was a balloon, go up across, and then a couple more different color balloons were there. And so somebody's just let some balloons off, but they're all going in different directions. And then a whole heap was up there, and then the whole sky lit up with stars at the same time.
In the daytime.
And I'm shouting at my husband, look up there. He's like, don't be ridiculous. I'm not interested, whatever. And I'm like, this is the most amazing thing. And I'm trying to express how exciting this is. And thinking, oh my God, they must have heard me, because they're all up there showing themselves to me and proving that they are really here. So, and then within a split second, they all just turned off. And I was like, oh my gosh. So that proved to me these weren't balloons or any other effect. They just all switched off all at once. And it just made me feel, oh, gosh, that's my answer. These are real.
That's bizarre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, I think, during most of these times when I'd seen things throughout my life, there was always there were UFOs announced somewhere, or there was always like a bit of a correlation to prove that what I was seeing was not just in my imagination.
So things are starting to come together for you now. Like you're going, oh, okay. I'd like
still nobody's talking about any of this, and still feeling so alone.
Yeah, it's very isolating, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I went back to Taree and visited a girlfriend, probably that year or maybe in the next year, and we'd had a big night drinking, and I'm lying there in the bedroom the next morning, feeling worse for wears.
Bit dusty.
So I was laying there hungover. I was there. Basically, there was nothing else in the bedroom that I remember anyway. Just me lying on a little like a foam mattress, and going, oh God, I feel terrible. I started to think about these beings that I'd seen and UFOs that I'd seen, and laying there stressing, do these things exist? Am I imagining it? No, I don't think I am. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to test these guys out. So I was laying there and I just said, all right, if you guys exist, you'll come down and you'll heal me right now.
From your hangover.
From a hangover. And if you really, then I'll have to believe you, because I have no other choice, because I'm wide awake, laying here. Come on, And I just shut my eyes really tight, and I don't remember any beings being there, so to speak. But it was like something was going on, and then the room started to buzz like a bee, so loud, buzz, buzz, and the room started to vibrate, and the room just started to vibrate a lot. And then I must have looked down, because my stomach was vibrating, and everything was emanating out of my stomach like a ripple motion. And the whole room just was moving like this. And I was basically getting healed, whatever that was, with this motion of energy that was emanating from me by them. And then the buzzing stopped, and I basically ran out of the room to my friend. Oh my God, finally, this is proven. Now, guess what? Like, I finally got proof that what I've been telling people is not made up. So I ran out of the room and I was like, did you hear that? That was so loud. Did you hear anything? Did you see stuff moving? Oh, no, we haven't heard a thing. Oh, my God. Again, no one knew anything. So I was like, well, these really exist in my life now. I know this for sure.
Yeah. Wow. That must have been an amazing experience.
Yeah. I mean, they healed me. So this is what I mean. Like, I don't feel like these experiences have been really dramatically horrible, whoever they are. But I've had many, many dreams of being on craft, a triangular craft, actually. So again, with correlation with UFO reports, and a lot of the time helicopters, like that loud helicopter sound all night.
Right.
But anyway, so I'd be going to sleep, I'd be asleep, and then find myself awake in sort of like an industrial area, right behind industrial areas where there's like the large fencing and gravel and a lot of other people. We're all, where are we here? Looking up in the sky, and there's a triangular craft. And I'd never even heard of triangular craft. I'd only seen them myself. I hadn't actually, because I've got, where do you find out this information? This is again in the 90s and early 2000s. So I remember the triangular craft just coming straight down from a little speck, straight down on top of us, and people were screaming. And I'll be like, oh, yes, finally I'm awake. Yes, pinching myself. And I'll be saying to people, it's all right, don't worry, they're not going to hurt us, it'll be all good, we'll just go. Well, I'm pretty sure we might have even walked up a ramp. That's what I remember anyway.
So you say people, is it males and females?
I do remember males. I was one guy I actually used to work with, and I looked at him the next day, and he looked at me, and we didn't say anything.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So I do remember being on craft a lot and wandering around. And I remember like kind of looking in some sort of vortex or something, and you'd be able to see where we're going. We seem to be going like we seem to be traveling far, far and wide as well.
So you're on the craft now that come down?
Yeah, like
How many were there?
Pardon me?
How many of you were there?
20.
Okay.
20 people. I don't know who they were. I mean, we were all just sort of standing there, but I was definitely, every time I'd be like kicking myself and pinching myself, I'm finally awake. And I'd be telling everyone, I'm finally awake. Every time I see a UFO, I'm always wake up, and I must have been dreaming it or something. Now I know I'm finally awake.
So were the people of all ages?
Adults, from what I remember. Yeah.
You don't remember if they were older, middle-aged, younger?
Middle-aged.
Middle-aged, okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But when I was on craft, my main memory was having a grey ET right in front of me, and it was a female grey ET, and just the amount of love that came either from her or from me or to me and to her. It's like a kind of test of will I accept these strange looking beings and love? So I was sort of forcing myself to love these strange looking beings. Okay. And a grey ET. So quite a large head, big eyes, just staring at each other about a foot away from each other's faces.
So your height?
I don't remember. I think we might have been sitting down. That's all. I don't remember standing up. I just remember us both being right next to each other, staring at each other.
So how do you know it was a female?
I'm not sure, but she felt very old and very wise and very loving, from no other word other than love.
So you're staring at each other. She's staring at you, whatever.
Yeah.
And you're getting this feeling of love. And right, because it's not uncommon, put it that way, that people report this. And the question, of course, is this some sort of device or process that these beings use to make people feel calmer, more settled, to remove their fear? And is the removal of that fear a good thing, or is it manipulated? Well, obviously it could be, and well, it is, I think. And why? Then it's like, what's going on here, really?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. The only answer I have is it's kind of like, for want of a better word, a test. Am I going to be so afraid I'm going to kick out? No. I have to force myself to accept a different being, a being of a different nature, a being that looks different.
Right.
And they're not there to hurt me. So I'm trying to deal with any fears that are in here to make me produce the feeling of love, or perhaps maybe seeing them in the future, or anyway, that happened probably at least 10 to 15 times, probably about once a year, I'm going to say.
Once a year, over 15?
The last time my husband wasn't here, and it was probably a good 5 years ago. It hasn't happened since. And I heard my brother-in-law was living with us at the time, and he said that he saw a star. He was staring at a star in the distance. He was always awake at night time, and he'd go out for a cigarette, and he said he was staring at a star that night, and it just flew off. Mm-hmm. And he actually kind of confirmed that, again, there was that double confirmation that my dream had something in reality.
Oh, so you're saying you'd have this dream once a year for 15 years or so?
Yeah, I'm going to say about that amount of time over that amount of period of time too.
Right, right. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So I've watched you in another interview, and you said that you had another experience only last year, I think it was.
Yeah. So
Foot.
I sort of haven't. I've always put this behind me, and I never have spoken about it. My husband and current husband and I have had some troubles with, because he was like, "You never ever talked about this before," because it's always been a hidden thing that it's not like I didn't deal with it, because I dealt with it every day inside my heart. I always knew things were going on. So I know the exact date that I sort of was awoken, I guess, to start to deal with this stuff full on. And it was the 13th of February last year, which was 2022, because it was the day before Valentine's Day, and I'm pretty sure it was a Sunday. So I felt like I got a tap 3 times on my foot. So I felt like was told to go outside and take my phone. And I mean, I'd never really kind of gone outside in that time period. And I do remember we'd had that one of the volcanoes, I think in Tonga, and the sky was really purple, actually. It was really pretty. So when I was standing there and looking towards, I suppose, northwest, there was a light that was moving. And I thought, oh, that looks like a UFO. So, and it was quite low on the horizon. It was going quite fast, I suppose. So I took 3 photos, and ching, ching, ching. So it was going that fast, whatever speed that was. And then I felt like I sort of started to awaken to this. With that experience, I reported to MUFON. And I sort of said, I had a couple of other things. It's probably nothing. And he said, what have you had? So I ended up discussing with a man called Michael from MUFON. He rang me about 3 or 4 times, and we had a long talk, and he basically prompted me to actually see that my experience wasn't normal and wasn't benign and wasn't, just a nothing thing. So when I reported it, he wanted me to do some drawings and things, and there were 16 files he submitted off to MUFON. So I was like, oh, that's a lot. So within a month, I was working at somewhere else at Beenleigh, and driving back, it was about midday. And so I know exactly where I was, because I looked it on the map. It was between Greenbank and Forest Lake on the Centenary motorway. No, the Logan motorway, sorry, going 100 kilometres an hour. It was a really windy day, and a thing flew above my car, about tree level, boom, straight across. And I thought, that's not a bird, because it was sort of it was like a frisbee. And it just went behind the tree, and I sort of was trying to see this thing, but I was driving, and I nearly, it was where the road curved, so I was luckily I looked anyway. So that was a very flat triangular craft, by triangular I mean pyramid shape.
Yeah,
it was strobing really, really bright white, black, and it felt like it was like, look at me, I'm a bird, don't look at me. That's the sort of movement it was doing. And I thought, you're not a bird. Birds don't look like that. And birds don't fly like that.
This was daytime.
It was 12 o'clock during the daytime. And it went straight across my car. And that's when I started to think, how are they finding me when I'm doing 100 kilometers an hour on a highway straight above me? So this is where I started to think, oh gosh, have I really got an implant? They've followed me around the world. They find me, even when I'm not in my house. Especially, pardon?
What if they just happened to be flying over there at that time and you were driving? I mean, we don't know these things, do we? Like, how many other people have possible implants or have had encounters with these beings, and who knows? It's very, you just don't know.
Well, there was one other time where I actually saw the greys in my house, and I had booked in to go to a CE5 meeting, a Brisbane CE5 group. And I think that was on the 25th of May. And the night before, my husband was out in the lounge. He'd sort of fallen asleep out there, and I was lying on the covers, actually, in my bedroom, and I'd sort of fallen asleep, and the blanket was on me. Oh no, the blanket was off me, sorry. And I was laying there, and I realized I had sleep paralysis, and I'd never had that before when I was an adult at all. And I realized that I couldn't move. And then two beings were standing on either side of me. So it's sort of like a bilocation, that I was where they were and they were where I was, but we sort of, they weren't actually standing because the bed was there. So they couldn't be standing right in my room. So it was sort of like a dual thing where I was where they were and they were where I was together, if that makes sense.
Are you talking about two realities?
Perhaps. And I think that's how I felt when this healing had happened too. It was like they weren't really in my room, in that room, but I knew that they were there, and I was wherever they was, but I knew I was there. So it's it's a funny bilocation.
Yeah.
So these two beings were looking over me on, it must have been the 24th of May, say. And one was taller and one was shorter. And one was saying, "Why is she freaking out?" And the other one said, "That's because she hasn't seen us when she's been awake before, or, conscious or something,
Mm-hmm.
And the other one, thought that was quite curious because they've had contact with me for so long in his mind, and I didn't know who these beings were, these two male greys. And I did lose some time and memory there. It felt at one point I couldn't breathe, and I wanted to move, and they were like, "You have to stay still." And I'm like, "I can't breathe." And they were like, "What?" And then I just said, "I just want to move my hand like that." So I thought my pillow was over my face. But when I pushed my hand like that, they let me move my arm. I realized that my pillow wasn't on my face and there was nothing on my face. So I didn't really, for some reason I could breathe then. So I woke up like that 40 minutes later. So something happened where it was my missing time there. Don't know what happened, but it felt like that I was going through a procedure or something. So it's something kind of painful and terrifying that made me lose my memory right then. So
okay, right. So you had this sleep paralysis experience, did you say, with two greys?
Yeah.
Leaning over you.
Yeah.
And so
and I woke up with the blanket being moved out from under my hand. That's what woke me up. I could feel the blanket being pulled out.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is while you were in bed sleeping that this happened?
Well, it felt like I wasn't quite so asleep, but I felt like that it was like I was awake, but I couldn't move.
Yeah.
I've never had that before.
So in all these sort of experiences like that, when you've been in your bedroom, for example, has your husband ever mentioned anything, being aware of anything?
No, it seemed like it generally always happened when I was by myself. So, like I say, I remember my husband, he went to Rockhampton with his daughter the last time that I'd had one of these grey triangular craft visitations or whatever that was. And like I said, my husband was asleep in the lounge that time.
Yeah. Right. Oh, okay. That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I know that if I can mention this, that you teach art classes, and I'm really interested in the artistic connection with people who have these types of experiences, have been for a long time actually. I sort of discovered that connection in the late 90s, and that people who have these types of experiences are often highly creative people. They're artistic, or they'll sing, or they'll dance, perform, do pottery, whatever it is that they do. I remember receiving a report from some gentleman who used to make samurai swords.
Wow.
Or another one who used to do the boats in the bottles, ships in the bottles, I should say, and all those types of things, So it's really curious to me, this artistic connection. You got any thoughts on that?
Well, I'm going to go one step further. I'm going to call it the psychic connection, because it seems like I have some sort of psychic abilities. I don't mean to. I don't try to. Coincidences happen a lot. Like, oh, I was just thinking about you and you texted me. Or, for example, this morning, I'd never rung my auntie because I had to tell her, but my mum's been sick. So my auntie lives in Rockhampton. So I've tried ringing her and I couldn't get through to her. And I thought, maybe the phone must be wrong. No, a phone's probably 10 years old that I've got. And at that exact same moment, she rang my other auntie, who I'd been talking to already. And then she rang me. So, I said to her, you rang her at the exact moment I was trying to ring you to contact you. It was 7:30 in the morning. So it's not like it was So that's just one strange example of very strange coincidences that happen.
Yeah, and witnesses often report, or experiencers often report, many paranormal experiences in their life, or spontaneous mediumship experiences, or they see dead people, all those types of things, which those things were happening to them before, or they become magnified after their experiences. Has any of that happened to you?
I have had some experiences that thankfully I haven't seen dead people, because that's one that I'd rather have an ET in my room than a dead person or a spirit, personally. There was one time with my father, he's passed, and in 2017, before he passed, he was in a nursing home, and I had visions for about 2 weeks beforehand that I was going to help Dad pass over. So I couldn't get out of my head. I thought, oh God, I'm being a little bit egotistical, as if I'm going to be able to help Dad, as if this is really going to happen. So every time I actually hopped in the shower, it's sort of like I got really clear visions of me helping Dad pass over. And it ended up that my sister and I, my brother, all came together at Dad's nursing home. So we were only there for 2 nights. So on the first day we turned up, and I thought, oh, well, that's a relief. Obviously I was making this up because Dad's pointing in the different direction. Actually, he was on the floor. They'd moved the mattress on the floor. He was that tiny, and it was so sad to see my father, who was, a soccer referee, always been fit and strong, lying there so tiny and skeletal, fast asleep. And I thought, oh, well, obviously, that didn't happen. So the next morning we went into Dad, and they'd actually moved the bed out of the wall to the exact orientation I'd had these visions of, that I was going to help him. And so I was able to actually help him pass over the exact way that I had psychically envisioned for 2 weeks beforehand. And it was, so that was the most amazing thing, just to help Dad pass over to, or wherever he was going to, and to help him to understand, not to be frightened, and just to have the privilege of being there with him. So, but to envision that exact scenario 2 weeks before, over and over and over, that was amazing. Yeah.
What about other family members? Has anyone else ever said they've seen anything unusual, or had any, psychic experiences?
Well, when my mum's in a nursing home now, and she's got dementia, so it's very frustrating. I can't ask more questions of her. However, I did ask recently, Mum, have you ever seen a UFO? And she said, of course I have. It's like, what? When? She can't remember any of the details. However, when I was 16, Mum was a nurse in the emergency department in Taree Base Hospital. And when I was 16, I was involved in a major car accident. And Mum knew about it for a week beforehand. So Mum had the experience of walking into my bedroom and bursting into tears. I must have been at school, bursting into tears and thinking Rowan won't be home for a very long time. So I was not going to die, because 3 people died in my car accident. And on that night that it happened, it was a Wednesday night. We'd all been at, some school kids and I had been at a match of some, I can't remember, sorry. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Volleyball, sorry, yeah. And we'd all gone out together and gone to drop off one of my friends at her house. And when we dropped her off, before we dropped her off, it had been raining the week before, and it was between Taree and Tanoni, and there was a really steep bend, and we ended up losing control because there was gravel on the road from the rain the week before, and the car rolled and hit a tree, and I was actually alive, and I was the only one awake, actually, and 3 people had died. And yeah, so Mum knew on that very night what had happened as it happened. And Mum basically had shut the house up, got the coat on, and was ready to go to the hospital before the phone call happened. So there's some sort of psychic thing that perhaps goes on, in my family.
Could be.
Yeah, that's the main 2 things that I remember.
Yeah, right. I remember in the other interview I saw of you, you said people like me didn't ask for this to happen. It happens to us. I thought that was very interesting. I mean, it's obvious, but just the way you said it. And that's why I asked you earlier on, did you consider yourself a contactee, an abductee?
Yeah.
Or just something that happens?
Yeah, good point. I mean, since that February date last year, I haven't been able to stop with me wanting to learn more about what's happened to me. I'm on, looking at YouTube videos all the time, reading so many books, trying to understand what's going on. And now I actually feel like that I've sort of got for want of a better word, I hate the word mission, but it feels like a mission to now talk about this. So I don't know whether that's the kind of person I am that now doesn't want to hide anything anymore. Whether they selected me because of that, and I feel selected because why would they choose me at age 8 or 9? It just doesn't make any sense, So and because I've had 3 different types of beings in my contact, it just feels like that's too planned to not be a reason. So I haven't necessarily chosen it, but maybe I'm just the kind of person that will just now start to talk about it.
Yeah. If it happened again, or if you could have the choice, would you wish that you didn't have these experiences?
I'm not really sure. I don't think so, but because it's kind of taught me to my 30 years career was in medical, and it kind of made me that person to accept everybody and anybody who's got some sort of ailment, disability, from a different race. I mean, in Australia, we're lucky we've got people from all around the world live in Australia. And so that feeling where I've had to push down fear and only have love has helped me through that whole career as well. So that's where I wouldn't say I wouldn't do this again, because it feels like then I could actually be my job now is actually to help disability people. So it made me who I was as well.
Yeah, it almost sounds like a karmic contract or something, doesn't it, in some strange way?
I do wonder about that. And I do wonder, because I do recall within myself past lives, and I do my earliest memory was when I was 6 weeks old. And I know because we flew from Scotland or England to Australia, and I remember the flight when I was 6 weeks old. And I remember where we went. I remember things that happened afterwards. So I don't know if I did make some sort of agreement pre-life, or I don't know.
That's something that comes up actually quite a bit, is people who report close encounters, particularly multiple ones, that they have very early memories from a couple of weeks old to a couple of months, like, and other people, they couldn't remember a thing, like, unless something significant happens, I suppose. But yeah, it's very common. And I think Jenny Randall's actually spoke about that.
Okay.
That they have actually very early memories, younger than most people. Oh, Rose, it's a bit of a story, isn't it?
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Oh, that's okay. It's thanks for coming on and letting me talk to you. And I think there's more there to be unpacked,
and
unraveled. And because we do see each other fairly regularly in person.
Yes,
I'll be following your story.
Thank you. And thank you for having me too. It's been a privilege, and it's also a privilege to have you as a friend. And so your group to enfold me in, I finally feel like I found a family, and I finally feel like you're my kind of normal.
It's true. Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. So it's a matter of really watch this space, isn't it?
Yeah, I hope that disclosure will happen, because it'll be a bit of a told you so, but also, well, here we go, don't be afraid. So,
and I know that you've become so quite engrossed on your quest about all this, and to the point where you've actually set up a Facebook page. Would you like to tell people what that is?
Yeah, so I felt like nobody was talking about this in Australia. A lot of people are talking about it in America and around the world. So I've created a Facebook page called UFO/UAP Disclosure Australia. So I only share news stories, and I think it's important to not be mixed up with a kind of any memes or anything. So it's legitimate news stories that I think is important for the Australian people to understand what's going on in the rest of the world with disclosure. Yeah.
What
Thank you.
What the Australian public needs to know, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Ro. And
thank you.
I will see you in person soon, I'm sure.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Cheryl.
Bye.
Bye.